Hi, this is week 2 of our West Suffolk Ipswich based Vineyard group, Kinship group. We have the theme of Risen, and this week, week 2, we did the invisible world. So the word invisible actually occurs a lot less than inheritance, which is what we did the week before. But it's very important, so I'm going to read a few of the texts that refer to visible or invisible qualities. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." Colossians 1:15 and 16 says, "The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him." And 1 Timothy 1:17 says, "Now to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honour and glory forever and ever. Amen." And Hebrews 11:27 says, "By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible." And Hebrews 13:11 says, "By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible." So there's a lot of interesting texts here which refer to an invisible world going on around us, to see him who is invisible. And the Romans text says that God's eternal power, his invisible qualities, have been clearly seen. So in other words, there's a way of looking at the world, there's a way of understanding the world, interpreting the world, that takes us beyond our immediate experience. And we get some people who say, well, I only trust what I can see and touch and hear, just the immediate world around me. I don't believe in anything else. But obviously that's not the case, because yesterday and tomorrow are invisible, if you like. You can't touch or see yesterday or tomorrow, and yet we situate ourselves in time and make sense of the now in terms of what has been and what we anticipate will be. And so the whole of our existence is based on this faithfulness in what we can't see. There's a very interesting analogy that I heard on what the world is really like versus how we experience it. And the example given was a computer. So most people have used a computer and they know what the desktop is like. So in the desktop, you have files, you have documents, you have a mouse, and there's different ways in which you interact with the desktop, with the computer via the desktop. Or if you're on your phone, you're moving apps about, sliding left and right, and double tapping and all this sort of stuff. There's a way that you interface with your either the computer in your phone or your desktop computer or your laptop. But if you look inside that phone or inside that computer, would you see any files? Where would the files be? Would you find any documents? Would you find any folders? Would you see any apps? They, in a sense, what the reality of the computer or the reality of the phone is invisible to you. The experience of the phone is totally different to what the phone is really like. And so it seems to me like a good way of saying the way we experience the world, it's useful, the way we see things and interact with the world around us. But that doesn't mean that what is useful is how things really are. It's useful to interact with the computer via the desktop or via the interface on your phone. But that isn't what the phone is really like, or what the computer is really like. So that seems a good way of understanding that what is around us, the reality of what is around us, is vastly different to what we're experiencing. And if you understand what you're experiencing correctly, that will be evident to you if you think about it in the right way. So, our values, our feelings, our memories, our hopes, language, even music, if you like, there's so many invisible things that we interact with, or that make sense of us, or that inform us or inform our day. We had a mention of the prodigal son. So in the story in Luke, in the Bible, about the prodigal son, he leaves his father. He's very generous, hence his name, gives all his money away, and then falls on hard times, and he decides he's going to go back home again. Now, he can't see his father, and he can't see his home, and he can't really know what's going to happen when he's back there. But there's an invisibility, a certainty of the invisibility going on here, because he's got a certainty as to that he's going to be welcomed back, even though in the story he's welcomed back beyond his wildest imaginings. He thought, well, maybe I can get a lowly job or something at my father's home, but in fact, as if you know the story, he gets welcomed, and they have a party and celebrate the fact he's returned. But nevertheless, the motivation that draws him back is not a visible motivation. I mean, if you think of a pool table, if you throw a ball along the pool table, or hit a ball with the cue along the pool table, it will move the other balls. And usually in the physical world, in this world that we can see, then it needs one physical object to move another physical object. A billiard ball knocking into another billiard ball, that will move the billiard ball. Or some heavy object knocking into a tree or something and knocking it over. That's the physical world of one physical object interacting with some other physical object, Newton's laws of motion. But how do Newton's laws of motion apply to what moved the prodigal son to go back to his father? There you've got an invisibility going on here, this sort of much vaster, bigger world around us that we can't see, where his faith and his hope that his father would accept him back was what drew him back. That was what moved him. It wasn't some physical object knocking into him as a physical object, because he's more than a physical object. So we also had a discussion about the interconnectedness of image and non-image. So if you look at a painting, for example, you will get all sorts of thoughts and feelings, which obviously are invisible, but that painting will kind of inspire. There'll be something that's kind of beyond the painting, right? This is the interaction between the visible and the invisible. This is seeing the invisible, because you look at the painting, but you're seeing more than the painting. It's kind of evoking all sorts of ideas and thoughts, feelings. It's bringing out in you a lot more than is just the simple paint on the canvas. And a film, similarly, you watch a film, you're not simply just watching physical objects, you're constantly interpreting what you're seeing in terms of meaning and value. We also looked at things like the aura and the halo, and whether you could, that might be a sort of a way of seeing beyond. Can you see, even in the physical world, that sort of like a heavenly glow, or could you see, could you experience a glade or a river as having some sort of presence, that when you walk through a wood, or when you're experiencing watching an animal in nature, whether there's something more going on there. It isn't just the physical movement or the physical object, but you're constantly getting to this invisible world beyond that object. There's a lot more around us than we can simply see and hear, and it's attuning our spirits to becoming aware of that. And this is really, maybe we haven't mentioned much about risen, but this is all part of what the New Testament says is part of our experience of being risen with Christ, because being risen with Christ is being attuned to this invisible world around us, and to not be constantly focused on what we can, physically see and hear and touch, but to always remember that that God is vastly above and beyond everything that we experience. To try and remember that just because we can see and feel and touch things, that there's this invisible God all around us and beyond us, and you get texts in the Bible, about there's so much more going on, the visible and the invisible. All things were made, have been created through him and for him, as it said in Colossians 16. So it's just remembering there's so much more beyond what we can see. We didn't have time to get onto this, but in my notes I had William Blake, who was constantly having visions at, I think, the age of 8 or something. He saw a tree full of angels, and so there's some people that do actually have kind of an experience in the physical world of things that are invisible to others, and sort of ideas of visions, or sometimes people, obviously, we know they get pictures, they get messages that other people can't see. They've got a connectedness with the spiritual realm, which allows them to sort of see in the supernatural, if you like. There's another text, Matthew 16:2 and 3, where Jesus says, "When evening comes, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red, and in the morning today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times." So this got us onto this topic of synchronicity and the flow, and whether, we often, something happens and it seems like it's a really strange coincidence because it seems to tie in with something else, and then like a third thing comes along. And this is another way of seeing the invisible, that we try to understand the synchronicity of events, where other things are kind of maybe occurring or moving in ways that maybe seem to kind of lead us in a particular direction, or it's almost like they're signs or messages that help us to understand things in a certain way. And just this idea of the signs of the times, read the pattern and the flow is what is around you. Try and be attentive to what's going on, and not to go above and beyond, not trying to read something significant into every little detail, but nevertheless to still be attuned to certain synchronous events, to see that there can be a pattern and a beauty and a sort of spirituality about the world around us, just things that we're seeing or hearing. So that was it, really. It's really just to try and remind us that the invisible is so much more than the world is so much more than what we can see and hear. To remember there's a lot more around us than we can see and hear, and to recognize that even the most confirmed atheist has got faith in all sorts of things that they can't see and hear and touch. They're constantly having faith in something, and as Chesterton says, if people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. So it's often instructive, if you're having a conversation with a non-believer, to try and get them to be a little bit more aware about what it is that they trust and have faith in, and what they do base their beliefs on, because it won't be things that they can touch, it's always things that they can't touch. There's always an invisible world out there somewhere that people believe in. It just depends what one it is you're believing in. So, right, that was it, the invisible world.